camera, and I want to welcome you to Anything is Possible. I wanted to squeeze in one last little video before the end of the year here in 2023 and wish you all a happy holiday, whatever you celebrate. My big favorite is always the winter solstice, and it's always nice to know that we're kind of past all of the very dark days of the season, although it's the beginning of winter. So for some of you, the worst is yet to come. For us, it does get a little cool here in winter. Right now, I'm very comfortable in just a long sleeve t-shirt for the most part. Evenings, I tend to wear a light jacket, but it's been in the mid-70s. Lately. It's overcast a little bit today, and some little bit more rain is actually predicted for midweek next week after Christmas. So I don't know, it's kind of an unusual year for us here, but by the large part it's still really wonderful weather, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It's always kind of good to reflect back on what you got done this year, and of course I moved into this house, started having it painted in May, and it was just bare white walls, and the backyard was nothing but bare grass, and I wanted, so even though it's a rental, to make it feel like home. And I've never done well living in rentals where I feel like it's not my house. So I decided to just go ahead and take the plunge and pay someone to do the painting. And of course I had to furnish the whole place and buy things that I liked. And so that got done. And then the backyard was kind of my dream. I've always loved redoing backyards or redoing landscaping, and I tend to move into places that are pretty rough in terms of the yard. So this was no exception, and I think that primarily I'm going to cover the yard. A lot of people have indicated that they really wanted to see what I've done with the yard. And I kept kind of waiting because, with gardening, it's like things just keep evolving. Plants grow, some die, and now I did save another dog. You guys are going to laugh at me. I'm always saving animals. But there was a shelter that was closing nearby, and they desperately needed people to foster an animal at least, and the person that was having the shelter closed down moved to Washington, and the plan was for most of the dogs she would fly them up to a new shelter in Washington State, and she would adopt the dogs out from there. Well, I knew, I did a photo session there, photographing a lot of the dogs that she had and trying to put together a little video to try and find homes for them or fosters. And there was one dog in particular that was another distemper survivor, like my dog Angel that I adopted earlier this year. And I just know that these dogs have a real hard time finding anybody to take them in. They have these muscle twitches, they call them tics, and it's just a constant jerking of their bodies. And with Angel, it's his whole body, including his head. Sometimes it looks like his eyes are moving. And it's easy to feel sorry for him, but he's had it for long enough. It's just the way he is. And I give him CBD oil, and it helps calm it down some, but there's really nothing that can be done, and it will never get better. So this dog, his name is Mystico, another big white dog, and he has a twitch. It's pretty much just on the right legs, his foreleg and his rear leg, and he had a really super, like his nose was like coming apart. It looked like just flakes. almost like pine needles, the way that his nose looked. And they said he needs to be on anti-spastic medicine because he has seizures. And I thought, oh, this dog really needs help. So, and nobody was stepping up to foster him, of course, because, he's a special needs dog. So, I decided to foster him, and, I brought him home, and it was just interesting to watch these two big white dogs. Within a couple of days, they were so bonded. They both realized, I know, that they had a similar past and had been through distemper and had this muscle twitching and felt different from other dogs, and they just clicked immediately. They were just best friends. And so I waited a few weeks, and then it turns out that he actually has epilepsy, undoubtedly due to the distemper. It causes brain damage as well as, spinal damage. Sometimes it causes their teeth to decay or their paws not to form properly or form really crusty calluses on their feet. Well, this is his problem. I mean, he has this tick on the right side of his body, and he has epilepsy. He kept having seizures like every few days. And then I found out that the reason he was walking gimpy was because his right wrist in his forearm was bending way back. It was just buckling back. And so I had them take an x-ray of that as well as his spine. His spine is normal, but he did have his wrist broken sometime. He's 5 or 6 years old now, so sometime several years ago had his wrist broken. Maybe got hit by a car, who knows, but it never got set in a cast, and it healed improperly, and so now his wrist buckles. So, one thing and another, I go, this poor dog, I mean, first off, there's no way that dog can be flown to Washington. It's just, he's too delicate. So I adopted him. So anyway, back to the garden, I had it pretty much perfect. I put down a layer of cardboard to keep the weeds down, and I got bags and bags of bark chips and put those on top, and the garden was looking pretty good. But then I adopted this other dog, and this dog's name is Mystico, by the way, which is, it's a name for masked fighter, who is very famous here in Mexico. They have these masked wrestling matches, and the fighters all have masks on, and Mystico was well known, almost a mythical kind of character that he was portraying. He was a good guy, but he wore blue contact lenses to freak out his enemy, I guess. And so Mystico has blue eyes, and he actually doesn't look too dissimilar from this fighter. So I didn't name him, but he was named when I came, and when I found out that's who Mystico was, I was like, well, I'll keep that name. So anyway, Mystico and Angel, my two big white distemper survivors, they tear around the yard. I mean, there's pathways that have been forged through my landscaping that weren't intended to be there, plants destroyed by their tearing around, and I'm like, you know what? It's more important that they have fun and they run around, and I will work around that. They've got new paths, and I'm just going to put in stepping stones and go with it. The thing that's really interesting about living in this area is when I'm trying to find out about plants, I get on YouTube and I look up these plants, and they are, in most of the world, considered to be house plants. And the thing that's really cool is that here you can stick them out in the garden, in the dirt, and since the climate is so temperate, they love growing in the dirt. There's never really a dormant season for most of them, and they can grow really, really big. I mean, like ficus plants stand back, and it was always, they were kind of delicate. They didn't like to be moved, and they dropped their leaves, if you did any, move them from one room to another, different lights that you, here it's like, they're as big as, a lot of people grow them as street trees. They're just huge. And so many other plants, and Dracaena, just, they grow huge, and they just never stop. You can just hack them off and they'll grow up more sprouts. So it's kind of fun to be able to grow all these kind of exotic plants and have them out in the garden, and they're just as happy as can be. So I'm going to do a little garden tour here with you, and I'll point out various different plants that I have in my garden. One thing I do want to talk about before getting into it is that my entire plan was to have kind of what's called edible landscaping or food forest. A lot of people think of food forest and they think, well, it's like rows of, an orchard, or you think of vegetable garden that's like a little plot in the back somewhere. And what I want to do with edible landscaping is you incorporate those plants into the landscape. And what I wanted was plants that are ornamental also, as well as edible plants, and some that are both, and attract pollinators, have a little ecosystem going where I can have lots of butterflies and birds and a water source, and a path around where I can get through. And so I have an awful lot of edible plants, and it's not like food is scarce here. I mean, because of the climate, there's tons of food. But the problem is that insects are also very abundant here, and so they spray a lot. And finding organic food is kind of difficult. So I wanted to be able to grow my own food where I knew that it had not been sprayed, and where it was, healthy for me to eat and have it abundant in my backyard, and hopefully have some to spare where I can give it to people to enjoy as well. So that was my entire goal with this garden, not to have a vegetable garden, but to have vegetables throughout the garden that could be pollinated by various insects, and have it as part of the landscaping. This is how the backyard looked before I started landscaping. This is after I had someone come in and actually remove the crabgrass that was there. This is a pan of when they started painting the walls. I had the back wall painted purple, and the side walls an apricot color, and then the side door painted purple, same as the back wall. Once the painting on the walls was done, I kind of did a little quick computer sketch of how I envisioned the backyard would end up looking once I had the planting done. The guys came and dug the path the first day. It was a lot of stones they had to dig out. And then they came and lay a large gravel at the base, and then they started laying the flagstone with a base of sand. It was rather time consuming to sort through all the flagstone and find pieces that were the right shape and size for what he wanted to do. Here he is finishing up the last of the path. In the meantime, my little crew started working on what had been a dog kennel. I wanted to turn it into a potting shed, so I extended the height of the shed up and added a metal roof, so it would create a nice shady enclosed area that would be protected to do all my potting and propagation of plants. And here is the team, my handyman Ricardo, his little son, and his dad. These are some of the plants that you'll see when I do the walk through the garden. This is desert rose, one of many different varieties that can be found here. This is called Buddha's lamp. Really beautiful. The bougainvillea grew back beautifully, and I planted a buddleia, which actually is growing well, and happy to say. And I'm very fond of various different varieties of cannas. They grow well over 6 feet tall here. Coleus grows like a weed. This is a cordyline. This is a small variety of heliconia, only grows a couple of feet high. I have another really tall one. This is a big boy tomato just starting to ripen in December. Fishtail fern and a double pink impatiens, which grow beautifully here, hanging baskets, and can be propagated very easily by water propagation. I have started a little kumquat, which is bearing nicely. And also I tried to grow zucchini, but unfortunately I found out about squash vine borers, which I've never dealt with before. I planted a yellow lemon tree, which has started to bear. It's pretty kind of unusual. They mostly grow limes here in Mexico. These are strawberry guavas, which grow on one of the only existing trees in the yard that was here when I moved in. It's fairly large, and I made some wonderful jam and also cooked some up, and I've been cooking it with chicken. This is a passiflora that I planted, and it started to bear. This is a pineapple. I started from the top of a pineapple that I ate, and it's been struggling for months, but I'm actually got some ideas on how to make it happier, so I'm not giving up on it. Lantana grows beautifully here, and I just love the multicolored blossoms. And this is a fan palm that I planted. It likes semi-shade. And this is a milkweed that I started from seed. I just collected the seeds from a plant that was along the side of the road going to seed, and sure enough, I got it started, and now I have some swallowtail butterflies. The passiflora or passion fruit vine that I'm growing over my little potting shed has attracted zebra long-winged butterflies, and they have been laying eggs on the vine, and now I have the caterpillars and the chrysalises, and some of those have actually hatched out too. So I'm excited. If you take the time and look at the insects that are all over the plants that I've got now, it's just really fun to see that from a dead backyard with just a scrubby lawn to this new environment is attracting so many beneficials. This is the concept that I wanted to use for the path. I found it on Pinterest and I just really loved it. But once I started trying to get these little stones placed in between the larger stones, they just don't stay put. They kept popping out, especially with the dogs tearing around. So I kind of gave up on that whole idea. And so I ended up just letting volunteer weeds grow between the stones, and I do get around to clipping around the stones now and then, but there's some that are really lovely. I'm not sure I'm going to keep this one's kind of weedy, but the others are, nice little yellow flowers, and they do really well in the hot sun or the shade, so I'm just going to let them kind of decide where they want to grow. In the United States, there was always things called steppables, nice little ground covers that you could grow between stones like creeping thyme and that sort of thing. But that's not really sold here in Mexico, so you gotta have to be inventive. I'm growing arugula and cilantro and some lettuces and Swiss chard in long pots so I can move them around. They get morning sun now. In my little potting shed, I'm starting some coleus and cordyline and various begonias. Let's go on a little walking tour. So that's about it for this time. Again, I do hope you have happy holidays, happy new year. I will see you next year. I have other videos planned. I've started filming them, putting them together, but as you probably know from other YouTubers, it's a very time-consuming process to edit. I appreciate you coming to watch when I do publish a video, and I hope that you have a great New Year's and a great holiday, and I'll see you next year. Thanks a lot. Bye.